The Podfather is back. We have episode number 2 here with my father. He should live me well. And we also have a special guest, my mother as well. I got both parents over here, the Podfather, the Podmom. We have to find a name for you, Ima. But
how about just Ima?
Ima's fine. Okay.
It's not just.
It's not just, of course. We did one episode on parenting because, parents arrive home from the hospital with a baby and no instruction manual. They have no guide for how to raise this child. And they're responsible to raise a child to be healthy, to be balanced, to be successful, to be productive, to be a contributor to society, to be responsible, to be a good citizen, to be a good Jew. There's a lot that is expected of parents. And they just have no guide, no roadmap, no plan, no manual. And I was actually talking to one of my siblings, and he asked me, he's like, do you know what you're doing with your kids? Do you have any idea? I said, I have no clue. Before you have kids, everyone's so sure, they have it all figured out. But once you have kids and, they grow up and they're in different stages and you do feel like, you reach situations where you don't really know how to behave or what to do, you do sometimes get a sinking sense of total lack of control. And to help me, but also to help the podcast audience, I want to bring on my parents who, thank God, have raised 9 children, all healthy, all balanced, all successful in their own ways. Of course, some more than others. Okay, but that's to be expected. And they have the experience and they have the scar tissue also to show for it. And they've been through a lot and they've really done a fantastic job. And they're going to be our guides to help us, please God, in our sacred pursuit of raising our children. So Abba, it's great to have you back on the podcast. The first episode was very well received. Everyone wants more. Everyone's excited about the Podfather. You're the new hero, the new celebrity in town. How are things? It's so good to have you here.
Yankele, having you as a son is a celebrity enough. I feel a celebrity. I just want to correct one thing that you said before. You say that you bring a child from the hospital, a baby, without instructions. I don't agree with that exactly. Because your emotions are your instructions. You like the kid? Is he sweet to you? Is he your child? So you have so much love for him that you need less instructions. You just need to love the kid and just teach him how to be a better adult. But you don't need a book. God didn't send a book along because he doesn't need a book. You have love, and that is the main book.
So really parenting is natural, what you're saying?
Should be natural.
Parent loves the child, cares about the child, thinks about the child, tries to guide and direct the child. And it's natural. And really you should know how to do it innately. What do you say about that, Ima?
I think that you have to be a good example. That's number one. If you're a fine example, the kids pick up on that, children pick up on that, and they follow suit. I have a few ideas how to bring up children that has helped me, and I've shared it with others, and I think I'd be happy to share it with you now. The first thing I think is that say no as little as possible. Why shouldn't there be positivity from the get-go? Say no as little as possible, but when you say no, children should know you mean it. You have to be consistent and stick to your guns.
So the kid wants ice cream, the kid wants pizza, wants Chinese food, wants new sneakers, wants to play on the PlayStation. Your default answer is yes.
Say yes, why not? But if you say no, you mean it. So kids know where they stand.
Boundaries,
right. Children, there should be a lot of love in between boundaries. Children do well, and they're happy. They need it. They want it. They want the boundaries because they know where the limit is.
So what if the kid wants things that you think are harmful for them?
No.
So if it's harmful at all, it's no.
Right. You're the parent. Don't forget you are the parent. Today, it's a lot of challenges out there. I'm not talking about the war that you would like to dwell upon, But it's challenging to bring up children today, much more than it was, I think, a decade ago, and more, twice as much as it was 2 generations ago.
Okay. But let's say this may or may not have happened to someone sitting in this room. We're, by the way, recording this in the Torch Center in Houston, Texas. My parents are here. The Torch Center has been elevated as a result. The previous episode we did via Zoom. I'm very excited to have y'all over here. Let's say this, again, might be totally hypothetical, but maybe it isn't. Let's say you are looking for something and you happen to be fiddling through your kids' stuff. You're rummaging through your kids' stuff because you're looking for something. And you find, a pack of cigarettes, let's say, or you find a little vaping device. So again, smoking cigarettes, everyone knows it's bad for you. Everyone knows it's harmful. It's bad for your lungs, but it's also, if someone is, striving to be, more refined member of society, they want to go to yeshiva and they want to be involved in higher pursuits. Maybe smoking is not the best. It's not the best pastime. It can be addictive. It's not a good thing. No one would say it's a good thing. So would you put your foot down firmly and say, this, no?
So first of all, I think you have to be very respectful of your children's privacy and not rummage through their stuff. But if you come upon something that is a no-no, maybe the best thing is to be open with them and tell them that you just happen to come upon it and discuss it. Open up the subject so they know where you stand and they know how you feel about it. Cigarettes is really a no-no. I remember myself when the kids were growing up, they knew right away smoking is absolutely taboo. However, on Purim, I would take a cigarette out for myself and a cigarette out for the kid, and we would smoke a little bit and
get it out of the system.
Get it out of the system, exactly.
So what would you say, Pops, about this? You find the cigarettes, again, which is, it's something, it's not the worst thing in the world, no one would say this is like, it's not heroin, you're not finding meth, there's not crack cocaine. It's cigarettes, it's bad. You find it in the kids, you weren't looking for it. I agree, you should respect the kid's privacy, the kid has to know that, but let's say it happened by chance. What do you do?
My big problem is that the kid didn't know how to hide it enough. If you do something that you shouldn't be doing, as you know you shouldn't have been doing that, please hide it well.
Or maybe it's a decoy. Maybe this is 4D chess over here. This is the decoy for what they're really hiding. Who knows?
Well, in my case, I would have told the kid what I went through in order to quit smoking. Mm-hmm. Nobody stopped me from starting to smoke when I was pretty young. But it took a lot of effort and difficulty to stop smoking. And if you describe that to the child, I think you would have some thoughts about it. I mean, this is an addiction. Addiction is a horrible thing. It's very difficult to kick.
But in general, just as a matter of principle, would it be the proper philosophy to say, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say yes even if I have to clench my nose, even if I have to say yes to things that I really wouldn't approve of, because I want to say yes, and I'm willing to tolerate kids doing things that I don't agree with, because it's okay, let them maybe get it out of their system, or maybe if I allow them to do this, they won't do something which is really bad.
That wasn't the way I dealt with my children. If I saw something wrong, I mentioned it. I wasn't violent about it, but I definitely mentioned it. It's wrong to do. It's wrong to do, and don't do it. And I mean, suggest to you not to do it because you grow up and you have this habit, which is a bad habit. So, don't get into bad habits. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't overlook it. No.
Mm-hmm. So the general principle that everyone's agreeing with is we say yes when possible. When there's something which is really bad, we mention it, we try to address it. And when there are things that you say no, either because they're really, really bad or because you just made a red line, that you stick to come what may. That's a red line in the sand, and that is, as they say in Yeshivish, Yehared Val Yavar. That's a point where you will not be crossed. Like I know I've mentioned this in the podcast with my children. I do adopt a similar philosophy. And I told them, one thing I'm not going to allow is them to get a smartphone when they're young. I think it's so destructive. It's on numerous dimensions. It harms their ability to concentrate. It gives them quick dopamine fixes, quick pleasure. Scrolling is the new smoking, they say. They could expose themselves to all sorts of terrible things. It really hampers them in every area of their development. And I told my kids, I said, I'm willing to do things that I really cannot stand. Like, I'll get you a car. I'll buy you a gun. I'll buy you a Russian tank. That's what my mom always told my kids. I'll buy you a Russian tank. They sell them on eBay. You buy a Russian, I'll do whatever it is. This is what I won't do. Is that a fair?
See, you present it very nicely. Like, I'm not trying to limit your kids.
Yes.
I want you to grab the world. Mm-hmm. But there's some things that I know as an adult that are wrong to you in the long term.
Yeah,
so
completely destructive.
Stop you as hard as I can from doing it.
Yeah, and you know, one of my kids, every 3 months he needs new shoes. Every 3 months he needs new shoes. I go crazy. What's wrong with the other shoes? But I say, okay, fine, I'll get him shoes. You know, he doesn't need it. We have a little debate over it. Do you really need it? He says, yeah, I need it because the other ones, they have this problem, that problem. They don't really need it, but okay. We have a whole little conversation about it. We tolerate it. But some things they know it's a red line, and hopefully that's a good policy.
I'd like to say that it's a good idea to trust your children. You trust your children, they come through for you. If you give them, you believe in them, they won't disappoint you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not to be suspicious of them, not to always accuse them of things.
And you know what? If that's the price to pay to have a new pair of shoes every 3 months, so be it.
Worth it. Yes. Ima, what else do we have on your tips? So we have say yes by default. Say no sparingly. When you do say no, you hold a firm line. Trust them, believe in them.
And remember that the children do the best when they have boundaries. When they know where you stand, where they stand, it makes their life so much easier.
So what about, let's say, bedtime?
So our children used to laugh at me. I would say, as far as I'm concerned, you are sleeping. Remember
it's
that?
past your bedtime.
Whenever it was, okay, suddenly they're hungry, they need a drink. So whenever you're able to, go with it. Go, but
my kids, they're like, at night, they want to just be up and chat and read and be around. And in the morning, it's a nightmare to wake them up. But I don't take a militant stand about bedtime. So is that included in the boundaries where it's important to be firm about that? Or that's one of those things, okay, you know, we'll be flexible enough.
There's no one way to do things. Every child has different needs and every child is different. And you have to be sensitive to what each child, one of our children had difficulties falling asleep. So there has to be a little leeway on that. Now the kid that's supposed to sleep at 7 or 8 o'clock and it's 11 o'clock and he's still hanging around. As far as I'm concerned, you're sleeping, and that's the way they grow up. Each one with their needs and their.
Beautiful, Mama. What else is on your quick tips?
A quick tip is, Abba always says it: love your children, love your children. Children can never rebel against love. They can rebel about a lot of things, but love, hard to rebel against. So keep loving them.
Even if sometimes it's hard. Is that fair to say? I guess, you know, it's your children. You love them.
And I believe in hugging them and kissing them and physical love as well as the emotional, whatever you can give them. You'll never be sorry.
This was a theme that came up in the last episode, the importance of loving your children and basing the relationship on love.
Well, it happens to be that it wasn't hard. I love my children. They're great. So it wasn't difficult for me to love them, and I still do, and I always will.
That was amazing, Ima. Incredible, wonderful. I want to talk about some other things that are happening in the world and maybe probe some of the questions of how we as parents navigate some of the difficulties or some of the situations that are happening in the world. So, of course, we have the war in Gaza. There was a terrible, terrible terrorist attack where Hamas terrorists infiltrated Jewish towns and just indiscriminately slaughtered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of innocent people in the most brutal, brutal way. Some of the things that I read and that I heard about, like, are so grisly, are so cruel. It's an unimaginable what these people went through and what they're going through. Think about the families of the hostages. I read that there's over 100 bodies that they can't identify because they've been so destroyed beyond recognition. All they have is a lump of coal. Go figure out who that is. And these families are plunged into this uncertainty. Is their child, is their parent, is their relative in Gaza a hostage? Who knows what they're going through? Are they dead and you just don't know it? It's just a terrible, terrible circumstance. Of course, there's a war. And the war, well, there's, the tanks rolling in and the soldiers rolling in, and you have the aerial strikes, and there's a lot of video available. And the question that I want to maybe throw out over here is how do we address this with our children? On one hand, it's important for them to know we don't want our kids to be living shielded from everything. We don't believe in what's known as helicopter parenting, where the kid lives in like a bubble, never exposed to anything. Because then they don't have the capacity to engage with the real world. It's a sharp wake-up call for people when they get exposed to the big bad world. I think as children, it's important for our children to know that as Jews, we have a closer relationship with Hashem, and we have a heightened responsibility in the world. But it also, the reality of the world that we live in is that there is hatred towards us, and there has been throughout all times. And we've suffered tremendously as a people. And that still exists, and it exists even in America today. So I think it's important for kids to know that, and maybe this war will be a good example of that, innocent people were slaughtered. On the other hand, we don't want to scare them. We don't want them to be terrified and to wet their beds and to be paranoid. So we want them to be sensitive, but not to be terrified. We want them to empathize with their brethren, but not have that dominate their life and cripple them. We want to shield them, but maybe not too much. We don't want to coddle them. We don't want to raise them in a completely hermetically sealed environment. So obviously this is a general question, but specifically with respect to the war, what would be some ways to parents can maybe think about how to address this? What to tell the kids, what to not tell the kids, how to address it?
Kids know more than we think they do. They pick up from their friends, from the society. They know a lot. I myself, personally, I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. So I grew up with terrifying thoughts, and till today, it affects me. I think the best way to deal with the war that's going on is just to try to strengthen ourselves, because not only are children scared, so are adults. To strengthen ourselves in our munah and bitachon, to believe and to trust in Hashem. And I've seen numerous clips of the soldiers before they went out to war. There is Shema. All these soldiers say it together, and then this shofar blowing. It's awe-inspiring, absolutely. And you see that, and you just try to strengthen yourself and realizing that everything is from Hashem, everything, and just get strength from that. And I daven when I say Oseh Shalom, I really think that all the soldiers should come home safe and healthy to their families. It's serious times, but the feeling that I get is that it's almost like the days of David HaMelech, when before they went out to war, they davened and they said Shema, and they prepared themselves spiritually, emotionally, and that gives them strength and our strength and us strength to exist today in these difficult times.
I want to talk more about what it was like to grow up as a daughter of Holocaust survivors. So you said that you were fearful then, and you even have fears today because of that experience. Did your parents tell you graphic stories? Did you read? Were you overexposed to that? Do you feel like maybe you should have gotten a little bit more of a sheltered, of an insulated childhood?
Actually, my parents didn't really speak about it, and that's many, many parents. And I'm absolutely, it's incredible that that all the Holocaust survivors were able to lead normal lives, have family, wake up in the morning and smile. We can't imagine what they went through. My mother was in Auschwitz, and she survived. My father was in labor camps, slave labor, and they were zocha to raise a family. I think we're pretty normal, and it's the Jews have suffered and have gone through, but they rebuild, they unite, they start all over again, and their strength as a nation is unparalleled.
Unbelievable. But what were some of the experiences that you had
so
growing up?
So first of all, when I come to a new place, I look, where can I hide? If God forbid they're after me, where can I hide? And then as you mature, you realize that you can't hide. Hashem is with us, and whatever is destined to happen is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. But do you feel like you got that paranoia, maybe we could call it? Or maybe it's real. Maybe it's real fear. I used to hear a joke. There was a joke that they said, why are the Jews all paranoid? They said the only ones who survived all these thousands of years were the ones who were paranoid.
It's a bitter laughter, huh?
It's awful. But were you exposed to it in an overt way? Did your parents always say, where's the exit? Who's that guy? Why is the look?
No.
Why look at me? So how did you pick that up? Was it just in the atmosphere?
It was in the atmosphere, and I was always careful not to cause them any more anguish or agmas nefesh or any pain, because they went through so much. I grew up a little bit in it with it's a guilt generation.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting enough, I can say the same thing, Faige.
Because you were also
I'm also a son of a Holocaust survivor. My mother. My father did not go through the Holocaust. He was out of the country.
He went through
peaceful
it,
Sweden.
It was peaceful, but it wasn't always clear it was going to be peaceful.
But he didn't know. He didn't go through what my mother went through.
Of course not.
Okay, so my mother was. She knew very well how to tell us stories of those days without scaring us.
However, till today, you don't want to hear any more Holocaust stories.
Well, it's overwhelming. I can't read any more about it. I would just now read the book from Benji's mother. And I can't believe what she's telling over there. And I'm sure my mother went through the same things, but she never said it. We used to sit Motzei Shabbos. My father went to yeshiva to give a shmuz. And we stayed home, dark, with our mother, and she would tell us stories. But the stories were filtered. She didn't tell us the gooey stuff, the scary stuff. She did not scare us.
I was from the very, very fortunate ones to have a grandmother. Practically nobody had a grandmother in that generation. Who had grandparents?
They were all killed in the war.
All killed in the war. It happened to be that when my mother and my aunt walked with my grandmother through where they were in line for Mengele to give them the point the finger right or left, and my grandmother was already a woman in her early 50s, and he said, "You're still young enough to work." And she went to the L'chaim.
Wow. So I want to really understand this more. So if I'm doing the math correctly, so your mother, Babi Esti, Ima, she survived. The other three grandparents were killed. Is that right?
Were killed.
And Abba, your paternal grandmother was killed in Riga in 1942. Right. And your maternal grandfather
was killed in Slobodka.
Was killed, in 1944.
Right.
And your other two grandparents passed away before of natural causes. So, and it's a fascinating thing that you're saying that your mother told you stories. Yeah, they were sanitized, they were filtered, but she told you stories. And did you feel like you have trauma from that? Do you feel like you have terror from that?
No, I knew they went through very hard times, but I can't say that I had personal trauma, no. And Ima did.
Ima did. I remember you saying, Ima, I know maybe this should be in the podcast, but I remember you saying that how your father would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night screaming.
That's right.
It's just, we cannot fathom what these people went through. It's unbelievable.
He was separated from, it's only him and his brother that survived. And when he was told that his brother was in Auschwitz, he didn't recognize his brother. He says he was skin and bones.
Skin and bones.
Skin and bones. As a matter of fact, my uncle passed away, Yidel Shapiro. He passed away about a year and something ago. And he's buried in Har Menuchos. And I just spoke to my cousin last week, his daughter, and she said that there was an opportunity to have a burial spot in a different place. He said, "Oh no, I'm not going to be any place other than next to my brother."
Wow.
So the two brothers are buried next to each other, very close.
And there was a story, right? When after the war or towards the end of the war, they went on the death marches. Is that right? You want to tell that story?
Well, my father, Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Shapiro, was a very humble man, never demanded anything, never complained about anything. And he never told us that when on the death march, he carried his brother for weeks. He wouldn't let go of him. That's the closeness, and that's the...
So you never knew that story?
No. I only heard it after my father passed away from my cousin.
Wow.
Never.
So it's an amazing thing that all the trauma and all the pain and all the tragedy and all the suffering, you didn't hear about it, but you felt it.
I guess so. I guess you could say.
And it kind of filters down. It filters down. I have a terror that my kids are not going to know about this. They're not going to know about what, every generation it gets more and more removed from the collective conscious, of our children.
Right. You're right. It's scary to think the world. So Safta, Aleh Shalom, wrote a book. Now, why did she write a book? She's also a very humble woman. When there started being denial in the world that the Holocaust existed, she said, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
She has to tell her story.
And I get a sense reading that book, Faith in the Night, by my paternal grandmother, Rivka Wolbe. I get a sense that she told us 1% of what actually happened. Yes?
Exactly what I said. Yes.
Yeah.
She hid everything inside, everything, the real bad things you didn't hear.
Did you ever get a sense that she was holding back?
Oh, you could see the sadness in her face when she was telling us the stories. It's usually in the dark. It was usually before the end of Shabbos. It was dark already. Abba went to yeshiva to speak to yeshiva, and we were sitting around her, and she was telling us she was talking in the dark. So we didn't even see her expressions.
Didn't someone say after she passed, didn't someone quote her as saying that she was never happy? She hadn't been happy since the war. She just pretended.
I think I remember something like that, yes.
She was very warm. Very warm.
Yes.
Very warm.
Yeah, we did not feel, unlike Ima, your mother, that she felt some sort of stress from her parents. I did not feel that.
Wow. So translating this to the war, are we saying to the current war, but really to anything that happens? I remember reading that Saba, so your father, Abba, someone once asked him, how do we tell kids about, or how do we deal with the fact that kids hear about tragedies, about bad things happening, about people dying? And he said, kids, how do we tell adults about it? He didn't like the question. I feel like it could be an opportunity to educate children. Children need to be educated, and they need to live in a world. They need to have knowledge. They shouldn't live in La La Land. They shouldn't live with a total ignorance of everything that happens, everything that could happen.
Well, today's kids, they know what's going on, more or less. But it doesn't mean that they need to know all the good details. The horrible details, which I don't even know. I can't watch those videos. They want to show it online or whatever. I don't look at it. I can't see it. So I think I protect myself not to really be exposed to everything. Mm-hmm. It's not for me. I can't deal with this.
And what about the question of anti-Semitism? Is it important that kids know that we're Jews and we have a target on our back? Is that something you would tell the children?
Esav son el Yaakov. The Goyim don't like us. As nice faces they show us, but they don't want it. They don't know.
And is it important for kids to know that?
I think they get the sense. I don't know. I wouldn't scare them with this, but it could be mentioned here and there. Yes.
So you would say something like, "We're Jews, and we come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and our nation throughout our history has always been the subject of persecution, but Hashem watches over us, and there's a plan."
We survived.
And we survived. And we'll continue to survive. Yes. What do you think about this, Mama?
I think there's nothing wrong with showing a little force to the Goyim who start up with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's besides the point.
When we lived in Brooklyn, there were some kids that were very annoying, let's say. And
aggressive,
and they really started up, and Abba came over and said, if you don't stop harassing my children, I'll show you a thing or two. And
that's not what I said. I said, you'll see your brains all over this floor.
He said nothing gory, right?
Yeah, but to them, I can tell them exactly what I'm going to do to them.
and the harassing stopped. In other words, there's nothing wrong with protecting yourself and defending yourself and giving your children the feeling that you're there for them. You're going to defend them and protect them as much as you can.
And in general, you would tell your children, if someone, let's say, hits them in school, hit them back, right?
Oh, definitely.
We don't believe in just going like sheep to the slaughter.
My father used to say the same thing.
What did your father say?
Yeah, he hit you, hit him back.
Love it.
Hit him back.
Okay, so let's talk about something which is, I guess, a little bit related. I think it's another one of those tricky dilemmas that parents have. That parents maybe they don't have, but I certainly have it. And I think people who think deeply about the upbringing, the chinuch, the education of their children, I think they have to encounter this dilemma at some point. And that's the question of insularity. You know, we as a community, you know, we're part of the Jewish community. And we send our kids to Jewish schools, and we want them to have a Jewish upbringing, right? To be exposed to Jewish values and Jewish priorities and Jewish culture and Jewish society and Jewish community. But of course, we don't live in Israel. We don't live outside of the general society. We're surrounded by other communities and other cultures and other ways of thinking and other philosophies. And on one hand, it's important for kids to have a certain background, a certain sense of how things work in the real world. On the other hand, we want them to be Jewish and to really be living as Jews and valuing what our nation has traditionally valued and living the priorities and the ideals of a Jewish life. So how do you balance the exposure to secular, to general culture on one hand, yet to not be too insular that you kind of live in a little bubble away from the rest of the world? You know, we know that the Hasidic communities, they believe in much more insularity. So the kids don't speak English. At least they aren't taught in English. You know, they have Yiddish and they very much are distinctive in their way of dressing and in their communities. They have extreme insularity. On the other hand, we have maybe other communities that are much more exposed to the general world. So what's your philosophy, or what are some ways of thinking about this dilemma? You know, I'm thinking about, you know, books, right? Are we going to have only Jewish books in our home? Television, movies, sports, all those elements of secular culture, how much are you going to welcome in, and how much are you going to embrace or tolerate, and how much are you going to push back and say, no, we live for a different set of values and we have a different way of living?
Well, if you repeat that statement once in a while, the kids get it. Exactly this statement, that we are different and we want to stay different because we are the chosen people. So, you know, what you see in the street, and they see everything. The kids, you can't close their ears and eyes. They see what's going on in the world. Okay? So they see what the other world looks like. You have to show your way, your world. Your world is a holier world, and it's a healthier world.
Mm-hmm. You know, that during this conflict, we see, during this war in Gaza, we see a lot of Jews. Again, obviously not the majority, but there are many, many Jews who are calling for a ceasefire, who are even justifying the atrocities of Hamas, well, because of the occupation. And to me, this is an example of a failure of our community or of our communities to not instill Jewish values and Jewish priorities and Jewish ideals in their children. If you expose yourself to the world, you go, kids go on the internet and they go on social media and they go on TikTok, go all these places, they can read all sorts of things, and that will be very influential in molding their worldview.
I don't think they should be exposed to these things. I think we should protect the kids from being exposed to it.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
On the other hand, I once told someone, a friend of mine, a rabbi, I'm like, oh, just email me the PDF. And he was like, how do I do that? So maybe there's too much insularity where someone is like really living as a Luddite, living, like in the shtetl, and maybe that's a bit too much.
I think it's too much.
What do you think, Mama, about this?
I don't think there's anything wrong with him not knowing how to send that PDF or receive it. It's just he has his life and he decided not to become, I myself am not so computer savvy, so I can relate to that. But it's a balance. It's a balance. You don't want your children to be somehow to be out, exposed to a certain degree. But if it's taking a chance, let them be insular.
Mm-hmm. Better safe than sorry.
Yeah, and they should always remember, it's a good opportunity to say, have your children know that the world all the nations of the world look upon the Jewish people as the light, and it's true. And there's so many ways that we could make a Kiddush Hashem. Just being polite, being friendly, to saying good morning and thank you, all these things show the world that we are the special nation that we are.
Yes, that's a beautiful point. I know that growing up, we had exposure in our house. There were some, non-Jewish novels, newspapers, and magazines, and Reader's Digest.
Flying magazine.
Flying magazine, of course. Yeah, U.S. News and World Report. I don't feel like we were insulated. We were into sports. We used to listen to the radio. We did have exposure.
Couldn't find you, Yankala. You were by the neighbors watching a game.
Yeah, but by the neighbors, right?
By the neighbors.
But by the neighbors. And I think it's another beautiful point to tell the children, not just, well, I think that in general, every parent should think about this question of how much to expose and make a line for themselves. But the actual engaging with this dilemma and the calculation, the trying to sense of what the proper boundary is, that in itself is a productive exercise, because you make the lines that are appropriate for you, but it's important to have that, or else you're not doing maybe a good enough job as a parent. Like if you're not thinking about this, if you're just allowing open season, then maybe you're not doing enough of a job as a parent.
Right.
So finding the right balance, whatever that is for you, but to think about this is an important element of parenting. And I love the idea of telling children, not just we're Jewish, we're the chosen people, we have a higher connection to Hashem, and we have more responsibilities, but we also have to display that. We have to demonstrate that. When we walk around, we have to live by a higher standard. I think that's a beautiful idea for kids to know. Like, the world looks at us as representatives of Hashem, and therefore we have to live by that higher standard. And if it's okay for everyone else, not necessarily okay for us. No, sorry, it's not okay for us. So let's go to the final subject I wanted to talk about today. I was re-listening to what the Podfather said last time, and when we're talking about your successes in parenting with your children, And you said that all your children are successful and doing what they do best. That was the words that jumped out at me. Doing what they do best. I thought that was an interesting line and maybe one that we should probe a bit further. What do you mean by saying that your kids are successful and they're doing what they do best? Talk to me about what you meant by that and what maybe are the lessons that we can learn from that way of thinking.
Look at yourself, Yaakov. If you would have wanted to be a big scientist, you would be the best big scientist. But that's not what you chose to do. You chose to do Mikarev people to Hashem. It's a fact. Why? Why? A professor is more chashuv than a rabbi in Houston, Texas. Maybe not. But in my eyes, you're more important than any professor in the world. What I'm saying is that you are doing whatever you're doing in such a good way. That's what I want for my children. I don't care if they're not PhDs. I just don't care. It doesn't matter. It's not important to me. Important for me that they do productive stuff that help the world, and that all my children do.
So, but are you trying to say that maybe every child has a different collection of skills and a different type, a different list of qualities and attributes and strengths that they can deploy? And it's important as a parent, but certainly as a person and as a parent, to try to help guide a child in a path that's appropriate for them, in a path that's fitting for them.
Yeah, but you can't tell what's appropriate for them. Only they can. In other words, a person grows up and he sees, this is what I want to do. I want to be this. So he should be this, he or she. Okay? But when you do that, you do it the best way possible. And that's what your parents are pushing you to do. You want to be in Kiruv? The best Kiruv guy in the world. You want to be in business? The best business guy in the world. And so on. You want to be a Talmid Chacham? A big Talmid Chacham.
Mm-hmm. I remember hearing that the pasuk, the verse says about Ishmael, that Hashem was with him. This is in chapter 20. We just read it this past week. I don't know when this podcast will be released, but we just read it recently. Hashem was with him, and he was an archer. He would shoot animals. He was a hunter. He was the best hunter there was. If you're going to be a hunter, be the best. Be the best.
Be the best. In other words, use your koiches, your strength into whatever you're pulled to do. You need to do. You want to do.
Yeah, whatever speaks to you, whatever is fits your skill set. Yeah, Mom, what do you think about this whole subject?
I have to agree with Abba, who said that whatever you do, do the best you can. And I always said, if you do a job, do it right. Remember how many times I used to say that? If you do something, do it the right way. We were blessed with wonderful children, and they all are productive and doing many good things for them, for their families, and for the world. So I'm very proud of you all. Thank you for having us.
This was a lot of fun. This was delightful to have y'all in the Torch Center on the podcast, the Podfather and the Pod Mom. We have to come up with a nickname, Mama, for you.
Pod Mama.
Pod Mama. And a lot of people don't feel or don't know that parenting is really supposed to be natural. They don't know. They don't know. And to hear that from you, and to hear you talk about some of the things that you did with your children and some of the philosophies that you're sharing here, it's very helpful for people. Sometimes we don't know what we know. We don't realize what it is that we actually know and how valuable that could be for someone to know that. Because the things that come to us naturally, or the things that we really do well, are things that we assume everyone else does well. And a lot of people are absolutely mystified by parenting. Totally mystified. And they don't know what to do. And they want to raise their children well, but they just blunder.
So they over-control.
They're very controlling, exactly.
Over-controlling.
But they think that that's the right thing to do because they don't know.
So that's what we hear.
Okay,
exactly what we hear.
Yes. And so it's a real service that you have done. And I hope to have, please God, many more episodes of the Podfather. If someone wants to send in any questions, we still have some questions for next episode. Some people submitted, but if there are more questions, please submit them. You can send them to me, rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. And Mama, this was your first episode of the podcast.
Yes, it was. I would like to just add something that if you're in a dilemma or you don't know how to go to the next step with your children, ask around. Notice people that you admire, the way they're bringing up their children, or the way they, in general in life, there are so many good people out there you could try to emulate, or you could ask them for advice, and that will help you. Also, there's another thing. If we make a mistake with our children, which we're only human beings and we can make mistakes, and we do make mistakes, nothing wrong by saying, you know what? I'm sorry I yelled at you. You didn't deserve it. Or I'm sorry I yelled at you. Or whatever it is that the mistake you did. It brings so much confidence into a child. It gives them they feel so good, and it just makes the bond between you and your children greater.
So to admit when you failed, when you blundered.
Admit,
100%.
apologize. It does wonders. It shows them that you're human, and we blunder. We also have mistakes.
Amazing. I'll make a note of that for the next time I make a mistake. I don't know. In 5 hours? 2027. I don't know. Well, whenever it happens. But Ima, you were great on the podcast.
Yes, Ima is amazing.
Thank you.
You should change the name. Make it Mama Cat, the podcast.
You're going to be a star, Ima, and they're going to want you back.
An honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me and Abba. And I want to wish all your listeners much, much success in their parenting.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to our next opportunity. And again, the email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.